Hello and welcome to Manibil. Recently, Essentia Foundation uploaded a video, and usually I don't care too much about these sort of semi-scientific, semi-philosophical uploads and presentations, whatever you wanted to call them, right? But in this case, I was sort of struck by a few things. First of all, I haven't heard the term intersubjectivity before. And that's purely up to due to my ignorance, right? And I want to add a few comments to that. But also the presentation by this Dr. Emily Adlam is, it's like trying to paint an antelope while it's running or something like that, right? It's like she's going on ludicrous speed to paraphrase Mel Brooks, right? It's like I have never seen a presentation so, what's the term? It's not erratic. It's just at ridiculous speed, right? It's like, and the slides are like, a page of a book or something like that. It's unbelievable, right? And and it's sort of symptomatic in a way of how I see academics or academia. Maybe it's always been like this, but it's becoming more and more like it in a way, right? It's becoming more and more outrageous in a way, right? And these people in academia, I suppose, are getting more and more weird in their attempts to come across as smart, you could say, right? Or driven, or academic, or wise and smart, and so on, right? It seems like a symptom to me, right? Okay, first of all, intersubjective. The title of the video is "Does Science Need Intersubjectivity?" And I had to look up the term, right? And what I found on Wikipedia was this. In philosophy, psychology, sociology, and anthropology, intersubjectivity is the relation or intersection between people's cognitive perspectives. Okay, so why would there be a relation between cognitive perspective? Because if you are within your experience, right, whatever there might be of other people, quote, they are related to your cognitive perspectives, right? You can't cognize from outside. You can't cognize in God mode, you could say. And I don't like to use the term God, but it's sort of a common phrase, right? God mode. You're looking at everything from up on high, looking at the landscape, the atlas, right? And there's a person there and a person there. This kind of thinking emanates from a abstracted view of what is going on, while everybody has their first person subjective view. And if they're talking about an intersection, that intersection is not experienced. That's an abstraction also, right? So intersubjectivity is pure mental gymnastics. And when you're talking about an intersection, it sounds to me like something that is physical. You're sectioning things off, right? Or there's a connection between this object and that object, right? What is a cognitive perspective? And I know this is Wikipedia and so on, right? Now, a definition like this creates way more questions than it answers, right? Okay. Intersubjectivity is a term coined by social scientists to refer to a variety of types of human interaction. Interaction Okay, so what is that, right? Am I interacting now? I'm talking to my computer, right? So am I doing some intersubjectivity now? What does it take, right? Refers to a variety of types of human interaction. For example, social psychologists Alex Gillespie and Flora Cornish listed at least 7 definitions. At least. One definition is not enough. We have to have 7, right? Okay, so we are going into bullshit land, in my opinion, right? If you have 7 definitions, it doesn't work, right? I can't use that for anything, right? Okay, 1. People's agreement on the shared definition of a concept. You can't have a shared definition. It's not, you can't have something that is shared. A concept is a cognition, right? Elephant is a concept because you can cognize elephant, right? So therefore it's concept, you can conceptualize elephant. But you could say that, okay, if I talk to somebody else via language, I can get some evidence that they might also be able to do the same thing that I'm doing. But I can't experience them doing it. I can only have their report of, yes, I, experience elephant. And when I pointed in that direction and that I heard the word from that person, elephant, it should be weird that they're not experiencing or having the same cognition as I'm having when I'm experiencing that elephant while we are in this triangulation of words and cognitions and language and so on, right? So I understand that you can report upon your cognitions, but that doesn't mean that you have the cognition that somebody else has, qua the problem of other minds, right? So it's about being very, very careful doing this, right? I am constantly looking out for when they jump the gun and say, because you report elephant, therefore I know that you know elephant, right? We have to be careful not to go there because that's fallacious, right? Okay. People's mutual awareness of agreement or disagreement or of understanding or misunderstanding each other. Right? I mean, can you believe that, right? How would anybody write something like this? People's mutual awareness of agreement or disagreement or of understanding or misunderstanding of each other. The awareness of agreement or disagreement or understanding or misunderstanding. What the hell is that, right? You have to be a crazy academic in order to write something like that, hoping that you are illuminating the world and bringing things forth, right? You're only creating academic bullshit language to make it sound like you know something. That's my opinion of this, right? Go back to the drawing board, please. People's attribution of intentionality, feelings, and beliefs to each other. So because I attribute something, I am intersubjectivitizing something. I believe that because you look like that, you are toxic masculinity, something like. Is that what we're doing now, right? It's so fluffy, this, right? People's implicit or automatic behavioral orientations towards other people. Implicit or automatic behavioral orientation. What's an orientation, right? What does it mean that is behavioral, right? Implicit, automatic, towards other people. People's interactive performance within a situation. People's shared or taken for granted background assumptions, whether consensual or contested, and the variety of possible relations between people's perspectives. Okay, so now it should be fucking crystal clear to you what they're doing when you're talking about intersubjectivity, right? No, it if I had any idea of intersubjectivity before this, now I'm confused on several planes higher than I was before I started getting definitions on. And there's at least 7 definitions. What about the others? Are they not important then, right? Is it like, yeah, let's just take the 7 most important definitions, right? Give me a fucking break. Intersubjectivity has been used in social science to refer to agreement. Okay. So if I start in a workplace, start to work there, and I have an agreement, which is also called a contract, would that be intersubjectivity? Because in my sense, a contract or an agreement, I like to have things that are tangible and empirical when I'm doing my, agreements with people, right? I don't just trust words. I want it to be written in a contract that sort of where the terms used and the agreements are sort of hammered home and staying that way as best possible, right? So we all parts can go back and look, what did we actually agree on, right? Rather than, no, I used this word or that word in the definition of this, that, and the other. No, you misunderstood my meaning. No, I don't want any of that, right? Then it's not an agreement. You can say it's an agreement that we are exchanging words or exchanged words 6 months ago, but now it's up to who to decide or remember what was said, right? Is it up to me, or is it up to you, or up to that guy over there, or whatever, right? So, if an agreement is a contract, right, then wouldn't it be, and this is my philosophy, right? This is not, it's not I'm not trying to, it's sort of, I'm extending it here by my own philosophy. Wouldn't it be an idea to call that objective, right? When you have two subjects, two people, two of these kinds of people they're talking about here, getting together in an agreement, what they agree upon is objective, because what they are trying to agree upon is some kind of stuff they can cognize, they can objectify, right? They can conceptualize, right? You can't agree upon fluffy words, right? It's sort of, yes, we agree that you have to be nice, for instance, right? What is that? That's purely a subjective term that is up to somebody to judge. And who are going to be the judge? What side of the agreement, right? No, so the agreement has to be objectifiable. It has to be about something that can be objectified. For instance, an elephant or a pencil or an apple, whatever, something like that, right? And that can be a part of the agreement. And those objects that are for each of the subjects or people in the with participating in the agreement can be cognized, and therefore between them become objective, because they all agree about the same subjective, right? If I'm experiencing elephant and that guy, other guy in the agreement says, yes, I experience elephant, and that third guy that is also a part of the agreement says, yes, that's an elephant, then we agree upon the elephant, right? So it's intersubjectivity that becomes objectivity. That's what I would use intersubjectivity for, right? Because otherwise there is no there's no subjectivity that emanates from me and manifests in somebody else, right? Just by itself, right? It's if you say elephant and I'm not experiencing elephant, I'm not going to agree with you on it, right? Then we have no agreement. So fuck off you, right? But if you can twist it around in this fluffy language and saying, oh, you have to behave in a way that is not, for instance, toxic, right? You can't experience toxic. That's just an interpretation which can then be used to to control you, because you are not allowed to be the one judging whether or not it's toxic or not. And that is an appeal to authority, right? Now, I don't like authorities. There is nobody who's going to walk around and inflict their subjective opinions upon me, claiming it to be some kind of authority, which might be something you could also call objective. Otherwise, then shut the fuck up. It's just your opinion, right? So that's why I'm sort of careful with this kind of thinking, because it is very likely going to be my subjective, something along the lines of my subjective opinion, because I'm an academic, or I'm a politician, or I'm this, or I am that. Therefore, you should think of this as objective because I say so, right? I'm just being careful that we are not blurring those lines. Okay. Let's get back to the presentation and see what this, and I warn you, it is very difficult to follow, right? And I'll try to do my best as I can. It is crazy ridiculous, right? Okay, let's try.
And then since 2021, you've been a postdoc at the Rodman Institute of Philosophy at Western University in London, Ontario. So you're a physicist and philosopher. I'm not sure if you subscribe to one of these two more than the other. In any case, I'm looking forward to your talk. And you tell us about the question whether science needs intersubjectivity and the problem of confirmation in orthodox interpretations of quantum mechanics.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're talking in particular apparently about quantum mechanics. Actually, I remember that. I have seen a bit of it. I sort of forgot that it's dealing with quantum mechanics, and that makes it, in my opinion, even more crazy, because quantum mechanics is pure abstraction, right? Nobody can experience quantum mechanics. Mechanics itself is an interpretation, and quantum mechanics is an interpretation of how abstractions move about, right? An electron, or all these things, fields, or whatever you want, whatever you can dig out of quantum mechanics is pure abstraction, right? So, how can that be subjective, you could say? Yeah, well, it can't be subjective, right? Because if you can't experience it, it cannot even be a subjective, because it can't be experienced. You can experience something when you say, okay, I'm doing this experiment, I have an idea, my abstraction says that there are these electrons here, these whatever particles, and then I slam them together in the Large Hadron Collider, right? That is paid by the poor little taxpayers, right? So I can, perform my hobby here at CERN. And then I'm expecting this result, which I'm going to interpret in a way using some other abstractions, right? That is purely abstract. So it's like you're not experiencing atoms, you're not experiencing force fields or whatever, right? It's all abstract. It's an abstraction that is interpreted in a way that we are firing off the Large Hadron Collider, and then we are interpreting these computer screens into abstractions, or do they fit the model we had before, and so on, right? So it's all abstract. So I would say that you cannot even have intersubjectivity in this realm, right? You can only talk about intersubjectivity about something that can be cognized by a subject, like tomato or bicycle or something like that, right?
So, hi everyone. Thanks very much for the invitation. It's great to be here. So today, I'm interested in talking about what one might refer to as the first-person interpretations of quantum mechanics, also sometimes known as the orthodox interpretations. And what I want to do today is argue against those interpretations, because I think all of these interpretations share a pretty serious problem, which makes them unsustainable as ways of thinking about quantum mechanics. So in particular, my concern is going to be that these interpretations make it impossible to ground the idea that we have intersubjectivity, that we can share facts with other observers. And that's a problem because the epistemology of science, and particularly the process of empirical confirmation, relies very crucially on the notion that we can have intersubjectivity and that we can share facts about the world with other observers. So it would seem that these interpretations of quantum mechanics tell us that quantum mechanics itself...
So we can share facts. Okay, so it's already, there's a lot of things here that are already presumably settled. What is a fact? What does it mean to have empiricism? All these things are apparently, she doesn't need to clarify anything about that. As soon as people talk about facts, right? They are talking about knowledge. Because you can have a fact without knowing, right? I would say you can have a fact without knowing. If you don't know it, how could it possibly be a fact, right? And it has to be true knowledge, or for it to be known, it must fit within a true proposition, right? If you experience elephant, that elephant is knowledge. You don't have to express it in a proposition. But if it's intersubjective, it must be between two or more subjects, which are two or more persons. So in order to express your knowledge, you need to propose it, right? By saying that's an elephant. Now, that proposition can be true or false, but you can only know whether or not, you can only get to the result of the proposition seen from your angle. From your subjective experience, right? If somebody else says that's an elephant, you cannot actually know whether or not they know it's an elephant. It could be purely by chance that they're pointing somewhere saying elephant, and you are experiencing elephant in that particular direction, right? Because you do not have their experiences because of what is called the problem over the minds, right? You can only say that proposition is true to me, no matter whether or not you proposed or somebody else proposed, right? And that's a problem. These philosophers need to deal with this, right? They need to deal with this. If it's a fact, it's as if facts just fall from the sky, something like that, right?
Itself can't be empirically confirmed. But of course, the only reason to believe in some interpretation of quantum mechanics is because you think quantum mechanics itself is true. And so if these interpretations...
No. Quantum mechanics cannot be true. It cannot be false either. It's a model. It's a set of beliefs or for scientific models for what is going on, which has not been refuted yet, right? Just because they haven't been refuted doesn't make them true. Because you have to experience something in order to call it true. You can propose something. You can propose that's a computer, true or false, right? But just because that computer is set up to illuminate you about some kind of quantum mechanic experiment doesn't make that experiment true, right? Because it's not empirical. It's a model. It's an interpretation, right? It's an abstraction. So again, these philosophers who blur the lines between what it means to be a fact, what it means to know, what is empiricism, it's all blended in some elaborate word salad of some kind, right?
That quantum mechanics can't be empirically confirmed, they are undermining themselves, and therefore it can't be rational to think about quantum mechanics in this way. So I'm going to begin by being more specific about the class of interpretations that I'm concerned with here. I'm then going to talk about how shared facts and intersubjectivity work in these interpretations and argue that indeed they can't support shared facts. I'm then going to give two major reasons why it's really important to have shared facts in an interpretation of quantum mechanics. First, because it's crucial in the context of these kinds of interpretations to know something about the contents of other perspectives. And second, because it's certainly crucial to, at the very least, have access to memories and records of the...
So there's a lot of presupposition here also, right? First of all, she is going at 180 down the road, right? It's like, holy shit, man. This is more like, I have to just spurt this out. I don't care if people understand what I'm saying because I'm literally living in my ivory tower. I just need to, cough this up and throw it in your face, and there's no sensitivity towards how this comes across, right? And it's going to get worse. Just wait. But what is an orthodox interpretation? What is the difference between interpretation and an orthodox interpretation? Why do you need to have this double up in? Why not just interpretation? Right? It's like orthodox. Oh, so you're old school, you're old fashioned, or it's religious, or whatever, right? So these connotations that is used to, I don't like this kind of thinking, right? Are there shared facts in orthodox interpretation? Well, that presupposes there is something called shared facts, right? Why we need shared facts? Right? But who says we need it? Right? Who says there's a need for it, right? What can be done? It's like, okay, so it's like, oh, it's less kind of no sensitivity towards, it's like, I am an academic, I have to force feed this to the people so they get it, right? They have to understand this.
Past which tell us something meaningful about the past, and we can't have that without at least some minimal notion of shared facts or intersubjectivity. I'm going to finish by talking a little bit about how we can...
A memory cannot be a fact, right? That you have a memory of an elephant 6 months ago is no longer a fact because you're not experiencing it, right? There's a difference between I am experiencing elephant and that's a fact to me. Then I remember I experienced an elephant yesterday, right? It's two different categories of insight, you could say, right? I'm not saying that there wasn't an elephant yesterday, but it's different to say I'm referring to a memory now or I'm referring to a direct empirical experience, right? You're conflating the level of insight here, right? And it's incredible that these kinds of philosophers can see the difference, right? A memory is as valid as direct experience, right? No, it isn't. A memory is not empiricism, right? It might have been based on empiricism in the situation where it was created as a memory, but now it's no longer empiricism if it's a memory, right? There might be something wrong with your mind. You just have a memory, something that is actually that wasn't actually an experience. First of all, right? And secondly, it's not empirical, right? So it can't be knowledge. Therefore, it can't be fact, right? That's the limits of empiricism. She should adhere to her own rules, right?
Update these interpretations to allow having shared facts, and it will turn out that there is a way to do so, but we can only do that by making them less first person and by allowing that there is a notion of sort of third person standpoint on reality. So I'm concerned here with the class of orthodox interpretations, also sometimes known.
Look at this, man. Look at it. I mean, what is this? Is this a slide? It's one of the worst slides I have ever seen, right? How many lines of text are there, right? And there's different colors and different sizes and indentations and lines, and what's the structure here? I mean, and you're jabbing there at 100, going at 150 down the road. Do I have to read this while you're talking? And do I have to pause it? Are you expecting that? You didn't say that when you started out. You're just jabbing ahead, right? I mean, this is ridiculous, man. It's so small that in my window here, no, I'm not doing it full screen, right? But I can't read what the hell is going on here. Right? Okay, so let me read it out loud so that you have an idea that what is going on here, right? Orthodox interpretation, also known as Copenhagenish. Okay, so I guess that orthodox interpretations are how to interpret, or interpretation is in an interpretation of what is going on based on facts, right? But the Copenhagen model, if you're talking about Niels Bohr, that is okay. I'm coming up with a model that might fit the bill. There are little balls and called nucleus, and there's something electrons that moves about the nucleus and so on. That's a model, right? Does it fit? Well, it fits sometimes. Doesn't fit always, but it does a pretty decent job of fitting the bill for explaining what is going on that quantum level, right? I would say that's not an interpretation. That's a model, if that's what we're doing, right? Okay. Relative to each observer, every measurement has a unique outcome, and the probabilities for these unique outcomes are given by the Born rule. I don't know what that is. Unitary quantum mechanics is universal and complete. Are these orthodox interpretations? I don't know. Now, I'm not big on quantum mechanics. I don't care too much about it, to be honest, right? So I'm, keep in mind that this is not my specialty, right? Quantum mechanics does not describe an observer-independent external reality. And an observer-independent, how can you have something, a description? How can you refer to a description that is observer independent? You have to observe it in order to have any idea of it, right? There have to be some observation. Otherwise, you're talking mysticism, right? I'm sitting in my armchair and coming up with all sorts of shit, right? Orthodox interpretations includes Copenhagen interpretation, Neo-Copenhagen, Cubism, pragmatic interpretation, and some versions of relational quantum mechanics, or RQM. I don't know what it is, right? We are specifically concerned with the case where these interpretations are regarded as making a novel claim about the nature of reality, e.g., it is relational or observer dependent. Well, there has to be an observer in order to observe, right? And they're saying, okay, I have this observation. Now I'm trying to explain it, right? And I'm coming up with a model that explains it. I'm creating an artificial construct that could be some kind of placement for that which I cannot experience, right? I cannot experience an atom, or I cannot experience something that is so small that I can't experience it, right? And therefore I'm coming up with a model called an atom. And how does that model fit with what I'm seeing? Well, I would, if there's an atom and it behaves like this and that, I would expect to see this and that. And if I see that, okay, it fits the bill. Until I find something that doesn't fit the bill about it. And then I have to refute that model somehow, or at least some part of the model, right? So that's how this sort of science modeling goes on, or works, in my opinion, right? And what is down here is basically just references to Niels Bohr and Anton Zeilinger and C.A. Fox and Richard Healy and Carlo Rovelli. So it's sort of, it has to be apparently academic, and in a slide there has to be references, right? Okay, fair enough. But it's I hate slides like this, right? Well, who is this for, right? Who is it for? I mean, everybody, any kind of person is on YouTube, right? You might want to not, I wouldn't say dumb it down, but simplify it. Present what you're talking about. Give some definitions. What do you mean by a fact? What do you mean? If you're a philosopher, you should be able to do this, right? Don't just, slap me in the face with a, German slide like this, right?
as Copenhagen-ish interpretations. So these interpretations have three crucial properties. First off, they tell us that relative to every observer, each measurement has a unique outcome with the probabilities for the outcome being given by the Born rule. So in particular, that rules out things like the Everett interpretation, where every measurement has a range of different interpretations for the same observer, and we end up with different copies of the same observer seeing different things. Second, these approaches tell us that quantum mechanics is universal and complete. So nothing needs to be added to quantum mechanics, to unitary quantum mechanics. There are no wave function collapses. There's no additional classical ontology or classical particles. There are no classical trajectories or anything like that. So these first two properties might look concerning because there's a sense in which they seem to be in tension with each other. So in particular, if we think about a witness friend type experiment, there seems to be an issue if we say that unitary quantum mechanics is universal and complete for both Wigner and his friend, because the friend will experience himself as seeing a unique measurement outcome to the measurement that he makes. But at the same time, Wigner will continue to describe the friend unitarily and will therefore think that the friend is in a superposition of two outcomes, and there can still be interference experiments performed on him to see interference between those two branches. So how do we reconcile those two properties? Well, the orthodox interpretations reconcile these properties by telling us that quantum mechanics does not describe an observer-independent external reality. In fact, what quantum mechanics describes is something like a set of perspectives. And all these approaches have slightly different ways of cashing out what the set of perspectives look like and justifying what picture of reality they give. But the basic idea in all these cases is that we shouldn't try to make third-person statements about reality. All meaningful statements are relative to the perspective of an observer, and that is that. So this class of interpretations includes some versions of the Copenhagen interpretations, some versions of Neo-Copenhagen interpretations, some versions of cubism, some pragmatic interpretations, and some versions of relational quantum mechanics. So the reason I qualify all those statements is because I'm not concerned about these interpretations insofar as they're regarded as being kind of good enough for now, but there probably is some observer-independent reality out there which we might eventually learn about. I'm specifically concerned about these interpretations insofar as they're regarded as making a strong novel claim about that. That reality, that there are no observer-independent facts at all, or that any observer-independent facts that there are ineffable and unknowable. If the interpretation is just regarded as saying there is an observer-independent reality out there which we don't yet know about, that is fine. But I would say in that case, then all this talk about quantum mechanics being a sort of first-person theory is really a distraction from the real issue, which is to understand what exactly needs to be added to quantum mechanics to make sense of this and to give us a sensible intersubjective reality. In that sense, regardless of whether the interpretations are regarded as fine for now or making the strong claim that there is no observer-independent reality, either way, I think all this talk about quantum mechanics as a first-person theory needs to be put aside and move to the bigger question of how to make sense of the intersubjective reality.
This talk of a observer-independent reality, whether or not it is there or not, right? And if it's there, you have to explain it using quantum mechanics or whatever, or something like that, or it isn't there. I think there's a third way of thinking that nobody seems to be able to do, which is, I believe there's a realm beyond my experiences, but I can't get to it exactly because it's beyond my experiences, right? I'm acting or using my experience as if it's a representation of something outside my experiences. But that doesn't mean that my experiences all of a sudden then becomes that outside, right? Which is thought of the materialist fallacy. So it's like, it's just too fast. It doesn't show sensitivity enough towards what is need to be stated or thought about in order to clarify what she is actually talking about, right? It goes very fast, right?
So focusing now on these orthodox interpretations which tell us that there are no observer-independent facts, I want to ask a question about how shared facts work in this kind of scenario. So in particular, let's...
Alice measures system. You can't measure a system. A system is an abstraction, right? It's like saying, I can measure science. No, science is a principle, it's an idea, it's a set of methods or something like that, right? You can't measure a system. So Alice measures system S in the V basis. I don't even know what, but it's the confusion of the terms used and what they represent in these kinds of presentations. It's always screwed up. It's always category errors or referencing something in this slide, and then all of a sudden it references something else in another slide, and so on. It's all over the place. No wonder people are confused of what the hell is going on, right? In these kinds of representations. It gets so... It could be made much more simple than this, right? In my opinion, right? It doesn't need to have all these symbols and sort of semi, pretense of mathematical and scientific, which gives an air of this is very serious and probably right because it looks very scientific, right? But in the beginning it says Alice measures system. You can measure a system. A system is an abstraction and a model or something kind, right? So if you can't measure a system, what are you saying then, right? Are you saying that within this confinement of things over here outside in my garden, which I call a system, she's measuring the fence in the garden? Or, what are we saying, right? It has to be, observational, right? We have to observe it. We're talking about people observing shit, right? I know she's talking about quantum mechanics, but I'm not. I'm talking about something that I can actually observe. And that's why I feel that by taking this sort of backdoor through quantum mechanics, it might at some point pop out and say, and therefore, the prime minister is always right, or something like that, right? I'm just, I'm joking a bit about it, but it's sort of between the lines. At some point it pops out, right? Just I'm looking for it, right?
Imagine the following situation. We have two observers, Alice and Bob. Alice measures some system S in some basis phi, obtaining a measurement outcome in Fa. And Bob also measures the same system in the same basis, obtaining a measurement outcome in Sb. And finally, Bob performs a measurement on Alice herself, which is supposed to establish for Bob information about what Alice saw in her measurement, obtaining a measurement outcome in AB. So that measurement could just be an interaction in which Bob asks Alice, hey, what did you get in your measurement? Alice tells him her result, and that result, that thing that she tells him is the result of his measurement on her. So the question we now have to pose is, what is the relation between these three measurement outcomes, MSA, MSB, and MAB? So first of all, we can say quite straightforwardly that all the orthodox interpretations must tell us that MSB equals MAB. That is to say, the results of Bob's two measurement outcomes must match. That's because we saw earlier that the orthodox interpretations tell us that quantum mechanics is universal and complete, and that means that when Bob observes Alice performing her measurement, he must describe Alice as becoming entangled with the system that she has measured, which means that when Bob measures the system and then he measures Alice, his results must match in exactly the way we would expect from a measurement on any...
I think that is a violation of... That's something matches is not the same as they're equal. She's using the mathematical notation of equal, right? That's not how equal is meant in mathematics as far as I'm concerned, right? But okay, this is sort of handheld and equal it makes. But it's sort of screwing with the symbols, screwing with the terms, right? If you have a measurement over there, right? And another person makes a measurement of potentially the same thing over there. It's from a different angle by another person, and how could they be equal? How can you say they're equal? You can't say you're comparing them, but that doesn't make them equal, right? And you're saying they have to be equal. So how can it become a shared fact with if this guy over there think I have a fact here and I have a fact over here? The other person says I'm a fact over here. What is it that makes it shared? Right? Is it that if you're measuring the same object at the same time, in the same position, being the same person, but then it's not a shared, then it's the same person, right? They're not two persons then. If they're two different persons, there are two different facts. You can't get to one fact because the fact that they're having is the experiencing of the fact, right? The fact is the elephant. And you can only have your own experience of that elephant, right? If you're experiencing elephant. No matter how many other people say, yeah, elephant, 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 elephant. You only have a fact called elephant because you're experiencing elephant. If that experience disappeared, there's no longer a fact called elephant, right? And just because you have a memory of experiencing elephant and doing whatever measurement on it yesterday doesn't mean that it's a fact now, man, right? Oh. It's this that science is fine, but it's this is extrapolation through time and space, and doing the same measurement of the same object must mean we have the same fact. No. You're forcing conclusions into your observations beyond what they can possibly entail, right? And that's why philosophy is infinitely more important than juggling around this science bullshit, right?
Kind of entangled system. So the orthodox interpretations will tell us that in this situation and other similar situations, observers like Bob will always have internally consistent descriptions. All the things that they learn will present to them an internally consistent perspective.
Learn is implicitly saying that there's something arriving that has meaning into my mind and becoming a fact. So now I have learned this. It's like I am it's the science religion, right? It's this sort of it's almost a religious approach to science. Science has to explain everything, right? Science explains nothing. You're not learning things by looking at stuff, right? You're just having experiences and registering facts. But what are you learning? If I'm experiencing bicycle, am I learning more bicycle? Am I learning? Yeah, I have a fact that there's a bicycle there, right? But is that learning? I don't know. I mean, what does it mean that learn, right? It's sort of it's between the lines, and it's sort of and you know also this fast-paced approach to presenting that I really don't like, right?
And description of the world where they won't see any confusing things, where they won't end up seeing confusing cases where, for example, they get one.
And I don't like a headline that doesn't explain what you're trying to do here, right? Shared facts, okay. Let's say the same as saying, you know, blue ball, right? Blue ball, shared facts. It's like, wouldn't it be better to say, I would try to explain here what is meant by shared facts, something like that, right? Is it okay? Slap the text, shared facts, right? Done, right? I made a slide.
Measurement result, and then Alice reports getting a totally different measurement result. Everything will seem to make sense from the first person perspective. But internally consistent description.
Well, generally, how I see science and philosophy in relation is that science deals with what you can experience and how these things that you can experience, elephants and bicycles and flowers and so on, right? how they behave and categorizing them and qualifying them and say, when it's a blue flower, it usually does this, and when it's a yellow flower, it usually, and we call it a different name, sort of categorizing, making a library of objects and trying to predict how they act under certain circumstances. If there's 3 of those and 5 of them and 1 of those, they are going to behave this way and so on, right? That's what science does. And that has been sort of removed from philosophy because, let them go and calculate and sit on there, describe the world. And Aristotle, just, knock yourself out, right? But philosophy is all that thinking that led to philosophy, that led to science, or at least some of that philosophy that led to science, right? There's a lot of thinking that goes on before you can start doing science, right? What do we mean by an object? What do we mean by a fact? What do we mean by, objectivity, subjectivity, truth, proposition, empiricism, qualia, colors, sounds, objects, whatever, all these things that are basis for doing the science, right? It has to be fucking clearly defined and stated and described before you even attempt to go out and say, hey, we need to talk about shared facts here, right? It's sort of, it's a reverse engineered science back into philosophy, which might point to the fact that philosophy and science had, parted ways, and the foundations has been forgotten. Philosophers are living in their tax-funded ivory towers, and the academics think that now they have to explain everything. They don't need these crazy philosophers, and I don't blame the scientists. They are fucking crazy, these academic philosophers, right? And now they think they have to explain everything, but they haven't realized that philosophy is at the foundation of science. So it has to come back to the roots, right? And I have a sense that at these times that people are starting to asking deep questions, the deep questions, right? What does it mean to exist? Is there an external world that we can get to or can't get to? And all these things. How do we understand experience? Or trying to, this puzzle of philosophy, trying to get it into place, which has sort of been left by the wayside for 150 years, right? And because science doesn't explain anything, right? It doesn't explain anything. It just predicts stuff or attempts to do it, right? Create models that can be used to predict stuff. Right? That's all that science does, right? It predicts whether or not the bridge is going to stand or going to fall, right? Or whether or not, the tomato will be eatable or not eatable when it arrives at its destination and you go and pick it up, right? So science can help you whether or not you should eat that tomato. That can be sort of it's sort of a description of the objects and how they behave and help you maybe do some qualified decisions in your everyday, right? It just doesn't explain anything. And if you want explanations, right? Well, let me back up a bit. There's nothing wrong in wanting explanations, right? There's nothing wrong in wanting facts or in understanding what we mean fact and share the facts and, whatever it is she's trying to do here, right? But the point might be, can you actually get to an explanation of it, right? I mean, if we can share facts, the closest, in my opinion, we can get to is we can agree upon each of our subjective facts, right? If you say elephant and I say elephant and we agree, then we have shared fact. But we only have a shared fact between those individuals who agree upon it, right? You can't say, I have a fact and you have to agree, right? Everybody in this area have to agree on this fact I came up with, right? That doesn't work. Everybody has to have the say, and everybody has to be able to experience it. Otherwise, how would they know if it's a fact, right? You have to be able to experience it. And if people keep pounding at you, claiming there's a fact, but you, little peon, you can experience it. You just have to obey me, right? Like with an incident like COVID, right? Take your fucking jab, trust the science, do as you're told, right? That doesn't work. That can never be a shared fact, right? Okay. We are closing in on the 1 hour mark. I hope I'm basically using this as a stepstone in order to present my own philosophy, you could say, right? And this is very, very harebrained, in my opinion, and it needlessly complicated. But let's see how far it goes, right? I will leave that for part 2. And, thank you for staying with me this far. Please share, like, and subscribe, and consider donations, or join the Discord board link below. Otherwise, see you in the next one. Have a nice day.